Welcome to the MUFG Global Markets FX Week Ahead podcast with Lee Hardman, Senior Currency Analyst, MUFG. It's Friday, 17th October 2025, and joining Lee to pose some questions on the financial market themes for the week ahead is Simon Mays, Head of UK, Ireland and Switzerland Corporate Sales, FX. The following podcast is intended for professional investors and eligible counterparties only, and not for retail clients. Any content should not be regarded as an offer to conduct investment business or an investment recommendation, but for information purposes only.
Hi Lee, great to see you as always. I hope you've had a good week.
Yeah, good, Simon.
So firstly, I've noticed the dollar's weakened again, weakened over the past week, at least after sort of failing to extend its advances last week. So what do you see as the main drivers of that?
Yeah, I think what we've seen over the past week is that the dollar has basically kind of fully reversed the move higher that we saw in the prior week. And to us, the main driver has been political risks, particularly in France. So initially, the dollar strengthened when we saw the surprise resignation of Prime Minister Lecornu in France. But over the past week, those political risks in France, the risk of President Macron having to call an early election before the end of this year, those risks have diminished after Prime Minister Lecornu survived 2 votes of no confidence yesterday. That now buys him more time to try and finalise a budget for next year. And that is taking some of the downward pressure off the euro and resulting in the dollar giving back some of its prior gains.
And I guess there's also political risks to talk about in Japan. Good time to talk about Japan with the Grand Sumo tournament held in London this year for the first time, second time ever, I think, first time in about 34 years. So all in focus. But yeah, how's the political scene in Japan affecting the US dollar at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think political uncertainty in Japan is still high going into next week, which is going to be important. On the 21st of October, the Diet will be voting on who they want to be the next prime minister in Japan. And certainly looking at recent developments over the last couple of days, it is looking more likely now that new LDP leader Takaichi will be voted in as the next prime minister. She has been reaching out to one of the opposition parties, the Japan Innovation Party, and they have kind of moving closer to an agreement to at least get support for her bid to be the next prime minister. So I think if that is confirmed next week, that would help to reduce political uncertainty in Japan. And I think what we're seeing in the FX market is interesting in terms of the price action over the last week or two. Obviously, initially we did see the yen weaken sharply, dollar yen rising up to a high of around 153. But since then, it has briefly dropped back below the 150 level. Obviously, part of that is due to the broad-based dollar weakness we've seen this week, but we also think that's also reflecting some kind of disappointment starting to creep into the market over kind of hopes for much looser fiscal policy and monetary policy under Takaichi. Those kind of initial hopes for more pro-growth policies are starting to be pared back. Like even if she does become prime minister next week, it is looking more and more challenging for her to be able to kind of push through a kind of significant loosening of fiscal policy in Japan. So we think going forward, if there is any further disappointment and those growth policies aren't forthcoming, then we still think there's room for the yen to rebound further from current levels.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously after last Friday, trade policy risks have come back into focus again this week. So what do you see as the impact on the FX market from that?
Yeah, I think as we've seen this week, trade policy is moving into a new phase of kind of escalation between the US and China. President Trump has threatened to raise tariffs again on China by 100% from the 1st of November. That's in response to measures from China recently to tighten restrictions on exports of minerals from China. So from that perspective, I think in the near term, that has triggered some unease amongst investors. If we look at FX performance over the past week, It's the kind of commodity-related G10 currencies such as Norwegian krona, Australian dollar, which have underperformed, and that makes sense given that if Trump does follow through and hike tariffs over 100% on China again, that is going to cause some downside risks and disruption to global growth and global trade. But we'd still emphasize that we remain relatively optimistic that even if tariffs were raised above 100% on goods imported from China, then we think that would only be a short-term impact on markets, because as we saw earlier this year, I think once tariffs get above 100%, it's just too painful for either the US or China to keep those tariffs in place for long. So we think it would ultimately just put more pressure on both sides to reach some form of compromised trade deal and for tariffs to be lower. So that certainly helps to reduce those downside risks.
Yeah, thank you. And finally, we had the FX Weekly being released again later today. Anything we should be looking out for next week, and any update on the trade recommendations?
Yeah, like you said, Simon, I think next week the big focus will be on the decision in Japan on who to become the next prime minister. We also have as well the release of important CPI reports from the US and the UK. So I think that's going to be the big kind of focus for FX markets. In terms of our kind of trade recommendations, we're still holding a long euro sterling position and also a short CAD Swiss position. Certainly over the past week, that short CAD Swiss position has worked well, as we've seen those kind of political risks in France diminish. And at the same time, we've seen the price of oil dropping down to year-to-date lows as those kind of trade risks have escalated.
Yeah, thank you very much for your thoughts, and enjoy the Sumo Wrestling tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this MUFG Global Markets podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. Contact your MUFG sales rep for more information. Come back next week for more insights from the Global Markets Research team.